Have you ever witnessed the moment a legendary bounty hunter comes face to face with ruthless outlaws, knowing a single misstep could cost innocent lives? In the heart of Blackstone Valley, a widow once known as the Phantom Rider takes on the Harrington Gang, risking everything to save kidnapped children and reclaim her stolen stallion. This is the most intense face-off in our story, the storm raging outside, gunfire lighting up the gloom, and two terrified kids caught in the crossfire. Will the Phantom Rider's cunning be enough to triumph, or will the gang's twisted alliances prove too powerful? Find out by experiencing the full tale from start to finish, and discover how courage, loyalty, and an iron will can stand against even the darkest corruption. If this glimpse of the action piques your curiosity, be sure to subscribe to our channel for more thrilling stories and unforgettable heroes. Your support means the world and helps us continue bringing you tales of valor and vengeance in the untamed frontier. Montana Territory, 1878. In the fragile hush before dawn, the hoofbeats came like thunder rolling through the quiet hills. Maria Cantrell stood at the window of her isolated farmhouse, her breath fogging the glass as she watched shapes move in the pre-dawn darkness. Her ranch, Cantrell Horse Acres, was perched in Blackstone Valley beneath the looming snow-capped peaks, and it should have been too remote for trouble. But trouble had arrived all the same, in the form of the Harrington Gang. 8 riders, each one rumored to be a cutthroat of the worst order, were scattering her prized horses and forcing them into a rough line, guiding them off her property as if they belonged to them. Maria had heard the stories about these men: families murdered, ranches burned, stolen herds smuggled across state lines. She'd hoped never to cross their path. Yet, as she stared through the darkness, she couldn't ignore a sickening twist of familiarity. Something about the men's silent efficiency, their single-mindedness, tugged at her memories. She had known men like these once, ruthless souls who believed the frontier had no law for them, that no one was cunning enough or brave enough to fight back. Back then, she'd proven more than a few of them wrong, because the slender, middle-aged widow quietly observing these thieves was once the most feared bounty hunter in all 5 territories west of the Mississippi. They used to call her the Phantom Rider, a woman who tracked down wanted criminals as if guided by an otherworldly sense. In her heyday, Maria would ride across desert sands or mountain passes with the same ghostly calm, showing up when criminals least expected it, and vanishing before they could mount a defense. But that life had ended the day she married Benjamin Cantrell. He'd owned this plot of rugged land in Blackstone Valley and convinced her there was a future in peace rather than endless hunts. Settling down hadn't been easy for someone who'd lived by the barrel of a gun, but Maria found solace in Benjamin's steady presence, in the everyday rhythms of breeding and training horses. Tragedy, however, struck 2 winters ago when the mountain fever claimed her husband, leaving her the sole caretaker of their beloved ranch. Through heartbreak, she maintained the place, especially for her prized stallion, Stardust, a silver dapple horse that Benjamin had given her as a gift on their final anniversary. Now the Harrington Gang had taken Stardust too. Clutching the Henry rifle that once belonged to her father, Maria stood rigid and silent. Though her braided black hair had strands of silver at the temples and laugh lines traced her otherwise stoic face, she moved with the same fluid control she'd had in her youth. That old life, the hunts, the cunning, none of it had really left her. She'd simply buried it beneath the quiet routines of ranch life. But tonight it rose with startling clarity, filling her veins with an icy resolve. Those riders must have believed they'd found an easy target, a widowed rancher living alone, perhaps with no defense. But Maria Cantrell was the last person any outlaw should underestimate. They had just stolen a piece of her heart when they led Stardust away, and in doing so they'd awakened something deadly. As the Harrington Gang disappeared into the gloom, Maria slowly exhaled, set her jaw, and stepped away from the window. The Phantom Rider had been dormant a long time. It seemed the time had come for her to ride again. At first light, the valley awakened to the rosy glow of dawn, and Maria could see the deep hoof prints that crisscrossed her yard. Any lingering footprints had been scuffed by the Harrington Gang's careful passing, but not enough to conceal everything from a practiced eye. She knelt to examine a broken twig and some clumps of churned-up dirt, her old skills returning like a muscle memory. Decades ago, her father, an accomplished frontier scout named Tobias Redman, had taught her how to read sign better than any book. To Maria, the land told a story even in silence. By the time she stood again, her suspicions were confirmed. They'd headed north toward Rock Pass Ridge, a known route for smugglers and horse thieves. She was about to mount her remaining horse, a stout buckskin named Dust Devil, when she spotted someone approaching from the main road, a lean figure riding in at a fast canter. As he drew closer, she recognized Sheriff Leland Graves, the man who'd held a badge in these parts for over 15 years. He reined in, his weathered face set in a grim expression. "They struck your place, didn't they?" Graves asked, dismounting quickly. A swirl of dust rose around his boots. "I saw them from a distance in the night, but couldn't catch up. 8 riders, led by Collis Harrington. They've done far worse than steal horses, Maria." She nodded. The sheriff had once confided in her about the Harrington gang's reputation. Robbery, assaults on small ranches, rumored murder sprees across 2 states. "They took my entire stable," she replied flatly, "including my best stallion, Stardust." Graves's eyes darkened. "I heard rumors. Some folks say they supply fresh mounts to criminals across the region, helping bank robbers and rustlers vanish into the hills. That's how they're always 2 steps ahead of any posse." He glanced at the rifle in Mariah's hands, noting the well-worn grip and the resolute calm in her gaze. "It's dangerous going after them alone." Maria knew the truth. A posse would be too slow, waiting for telegraphs, coordinating with distant authorities. By the time any official pursuit got organized, the Harrington gang would have sold her horses, possibly across the border. "I can't wait, Leland," she said. "By the time help arrives, Stardust and the others will be gone for good, and I won't let Benjamin's legacy vanish like that." The sheriff hesitated, clearly torn. "I remember the rumors that buoyed you from before," he said softly, referencing her bounty hunting past. "You were the phantom rider, the one who caught men that no other lawman could, all because you tracked them in ways no one else understood." "That was a long time ago," Maria said, though her voice rang with a quiet steel. "I gave it all up. But those men stealing my horses, they've awakened something I swore I'd laid to rest." "Let me wire for extra help," Graves urged one last time. Maria offered a faint smile. 3 days. If I'm not back by then, do whatever you must. But I promise you, Sheriff, I intend to come back, either with them in chains or not at all." With that, she mounted Dust Devil and urged him forward, riding away from her ranch at a steady canter. Behind her, Sheriff Graves looked on, worry etched into his features. He knew this was personal, and personal vendettas could become messy. But he also knew the tales whispered in saloons. If anyone could bring the Harrington gang to justice, it was the Phantom Rider. Maria's journey began with a brief stop in Blackstone Valley's general store, a weather-beaten building run by Harold Townsend for the past 20 years. No place in the region held as much local gossip, and Maria suspected the Harrington gang must have passed through recently or had local eyes guiding them. Stepping inside, she found it quiet for an early morning, save for Harold fussing with supply crates behind the counter. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. "Maria, I heard about the raid, I'm sorry." His voice shook with genuine sympathy. Harold had known Benjamin and Maria for ages. He was one of the first to welcome them when they moved to this remote valley. "They asked about me, didn't they?" she said without preamble, striding up to the counter. "Wanted to know if I was alone, what kind of horses I keep, how many ranch hands." Harold's eyes darted around and he nodded slowly. "Yes, 8 men came by. One walked with a limp. They asked too many pointed questions about the horses, especially about Stardust. But they also asked if you had any special defenses." Maria's gaze darkened. They must have heard something about my past. Or maybe one of their informants warned them I wasn't just a widow living quietly. She noticed another figure in the store, Eli Carter, Harold's teenage nephew, who was stacking cans on the shelves. Eli stared at her with wide eyes. Word traveled fast among the local youths. "They said they'd be heading north," Harold continued. "Something about Rock Pass Ridge or even further. They mentioned a hideout, though not by name." Maria scooped up the ammunition she needed. "Thank you, Harold." She paused, her voice lowering. "I'm sorry for the trouble, but if they come asking again, just say you don't know where I've gone." Harold nodded nervously. "Be careful, Maria. I've heard the Harrington gang has men planted in law offices. Rumor is there's a deputy marshal named James Dorsey in Helena who tips them off whenever a posse forms. That would explain how they've stayed ahead of the law, Maria muttered. She felt a twinge of anger. Corruption within the marshal's office was the last thing she wanted to deal with, but it also fit. It meant these men were more cunning than the usual bandits, capable of orchestrating multi-state crimes without leaving a clear trail. A timid voice broke the tension. Miss Cantrell, Eli said, stepping forward. Is it true you used to track outlaws across the territories? Like you were some kind of legend? Maria gave him a kind but measured look. Legends grow taller with every telling, Eli. All I did was bring in criminals to face the law. Harold cleared his throat. Some criminals no one else could catch, mind you. Maria pocketed the last of her supplies. Those days are behind me, Harold. Right now, I'm just after my horses. She offered Eli a small nod. Stay safe. Outside, the sun was rising higher, bringing an unusual warmth to the autumn air. Maria mounted Dust Devil again and turned him north. She couldn't deny that the quiet life she'd built with Benjamin might never have fully extinguished the part of her that thrived on the chase. Now, with her most cherished animal gone, she felt that old determination rekindling in her chest. As she rode out of Blackstone Valley, she reflected on how quickly a person's world could be upended. The Harrington gang's well-planned theft was clearly orchestrated by individuals who knew exactly what they were doing. They had preyed on a rancher's apparent vulnerability. But as her father had once told her, prey that looks weak might just be the wolf in disguise. Following the faint sign left by the Harrington gang, Maria traversed narrow trails that wound into the craggy foothills. She recalled how her father had taught her to spot tiny inconsistencies in the landscape, a displaced stone, a bent branch. The Harrington men had tried to cover their tracks, but not to a level that would fool someone with her experience. Each subtle clue guided her higher into the mountains, where she planned to intercept them before they reached any well-known hideout. Close to midday, she made a brief camp near a spring to water Dust Devil. As she was checking her rifle, she heard the crunch of footsteps behind her. Maria reached for her sidearm but halted when she recognized Sam Wyatt, an old frontier scout she used to work with back in her bounty hunting days. His hair was mostly gray now, his face etched by years of living rough, but he still moved quietly as any mountain cat. Didn't expect to find you here, Sam said, tipping his hat. Heard about your horses. Figured you'd be on the gang's trail. How much do you know? Maria asked, grateful for a familiar face. He shrugged. From what I've gathered, they're heading north, but might veer toward the eastern passes if they think a posse's on their tail. They've got a network of caves up there, part natural, part old mining works, where folks say they stash stolen loot. Maria nodded, recalling rumors of a labyrinth of caverns in the high country. I appreciate the intel. You still working with any local law? Sam grimaced. Not as much. There's been talk of crooked officials in Helena messing with bounties. Word is that Deputy Marshal Dorsey fancies himself untouchable, funneling information to outfits like the Harrington gang for a cut of the profits. Hard to know who to trust anymore. That's exactly why I'm going alone, Maria said, packing up her gear. No sense risking a bigger group when half the law might be compromised. Sam studied her. I remember the Phantom Rider riding solo plenty of times, but back then you had no ranch ties, no personal anchor. Now you've got something to lose. She felt a pang at the mention of her old alias. I have to do this, Sam. They didn't just steal a horse. They stole Benjamin's last gift to me. That stallion, Stardust, is more than a prize stud. He's what's left of my husband's dream. Sam nodded slowly. I get it. Listen, I came across some fresh tracks. Looked like the gang had a short skirmish with someone else. Not sure who, maybe a rival rustler or just travelers unlucky enough to cross their path. Keep your eyes open. I will, Maria replied, slipping her rifle into its holster. I'm heading into those hills. If you see Sheriff Graves, let him know I'm all right. You got it. One more thing. Harrington's men are professionals, but they're not the only threat out there. Rumor says they've forged alliances with a judge in these parts, Judge Lockwood, who grants them leniency in exchange for certain favors. Keep that in mind if you cross any official channels. Maria's jaw tightened. A corrupt judge would be the perfect shield for outlaws like Harrington. It might also explain how they managed to escape convictions in nearby counties. The more she learned, the more it seemed that the Harrington gang was just one piece of a larger, well-coordinated enterprise. She thanked Sam, mounted Dust Devil, and continued her climb. The temperature dropped as she ascended the winding trails, a bracing wind rustling the pine trees. In the distance, she glimpsed a hawk circling above a rocky outcrop, a silent witness to the drama below. Maria spurred her horse forward, steeling herself for what lay ahead. The Harrington gang had triggered more than just a pursuit. They had revived the relentless determination of the Phantom Rider, a force even their hidden alliances might not withstand. By dusk, Maria had followed the gang's trail into an area of rugged terrain overshadowed by jagged cliffs. The pine forest grew dense here, offering perfect cover for outlaws. She found an overhang where she and Dust Devil could shelter for the night, building a small, smokeless fire from dry twigs. The wind picked up, carrying the promise of an approaching storm. As she settled in for a long vigil, Maria unrolled a leather-bound journal her father once kept, a collection of meticulously drawn maps and cryptic notes on territories they'd scouted together. Running her fingers across the worn pages, she remembered being a child, listening to her father's lessons. Every rock, every tree, every gust of wind has a story. Learn to read it, and the land will guide you. Over time, she'd added her own observations, secret waterholes, lesser-known passes, rumored hideouts. Though she'd put away the Phantom Rider persona, she hadn't entirely discarded the knowledge that made her so effective. As she studied the map, she considered the strategy of the Harrington gang. They were rumored to be part of a broader ring that sold high-quality horses to bank robbers who needed fresh mounts, intercepting military supplies along the way. If that was true, their hold on the region was more extensive than she realized. And if Sam Wyatt's warning about Judge Lockwood and Deputy Marshal Dorsey was correct, they had official backing. No wonder the gang had grown brazen enough to raid her ranch in the open night. A flash of lightning illuminated the sky, followed by a low rumble of thunder. Maria kept the fire small and shielded by rocks. She knew that storms could be a tracker's ally, driving outlaws to seek shelter and making them predictable. But she also knew harsh weather could erase precious tracks. She was weighing that risk when she caught a faint sound, hoofbeats on the wet ground. Carefully peering out from her overhang, she saw a rider picking his way through the trees, someone who moved with caution and knowledge of the land. She stayed still, listening. The figure dismounted a short distance away, tying his horse quietly. He moved like a man well-versed in silent approach, carrying a rifle slung over his shoulder. Maria let him draw closer before stepping from the shadows, her own gun pointed steadily. "Easy," he called in a low voice, raising one hand. "Name's Charles Landry. I'm a rancher from the next valley over. I mean no harm." Maria's gaze remained cold, but she lowered her rifle slightly. "What are you doing out here?" He sighed. "Looking for my children, Noah and Lucy. The Harrington gang took them 2 days ago, said they needed insurance. They threatened that if I talked to the sheriff, my kids would suffer." Her heart clenched at the mention of children. "Why would they take your children specifically?" Charles shook his head, anguish etched on his face. "They wanted leverage against me. I may have given them information about nearby ranches in exchange for money. I didn't realize how dangerous they truly were until it was too late. Now they think I'm expendable, and they took Noah and Lucy to ensure I stay silent." Maria's jaw set. "And why are you here? Risking their wrath?" Charles exhaled shakily. "Because I can't live with what I've done. They didn't say which hideout they'd use, but I followed rumors they were up this way. I can't just do nothing. I'm hoping to at least find where they're keeping my kids before it's too late." Maria recalled that Sam Wyatt had warned about the gang's bigger plans. Hostages, especially children, were a new level of cruelty. But it made sense if the Harrington gang was growing paranoid about informants. "There's a storm coming. You can shelter here," she said, stepping back to let him near the small fire. "Tomorrow we'll see what we can do to track them." Though she still harbored doubts about trusting a man who'd collaborated with the gang, she also understood desperation. Family was at stake, and if the Harrington gang had taken to kidnapping children as leverage, then her mission to reclaim her stolen horses was about more than vengeance. It was also about rescuing innocents who never should have been in harm's way. The storm broke in earnest during the night, rain drumming on the rocky outcrops and drowning out most sounds. Dawn arrived with a cold wind and a low-hanging mist that curled among the pines like a restless spirit. Maria woke stiff from the chill and found Charles Landry already awake, staring out at the rain-slick rocks with anxious eyes. Neither of them spoke much as they broke camp, but the tension was palpable. A father searching for his children and a widow hunting for her stolen stallion, each driven by personal stakes that left no room for failure. They set off in a quiet tandem, weaving through the winding trails. Charles was not an expert tracker, but he had an eye for fresh footprints in mud and shared what scraps of knowledge he had gathered about the gang's possible hideouts. Maria listened carefully, cross-referencing each location with her father's old maps. She suspected that the Harrington gang might be holed up in a series of caves near Rock Pass Ridge, but there were at least two other remote spots they could use if they wanted to lay low for a day. Their progress was slow, hampered by slippery trails and the thickening fog, yet Maria noticed signs that the gang had been through recently. A broken branch, fresh horse droppings, the faint remains of a boot print in damp soil. Her father's lessons guided her like second nature. Even after all these years, she could read the subtleties that outlaws missed. By midday, they found evidence of a makeshift camp, an extinguished fire pit with footprints all around. Maria knelt to examine the tracks, noticing two smaller sets. Children, she thought, her chest tightening. She beckoned Charles over to see. "This has to be them," he whispered, voice trembling. "Noah is 10, Lucy is 8. They must have been here." Maria felt a surge of grim resolve. They moved on, heading east from the look of it. They can't be too far. Charles's hope seemed to flicker, then fade into worry. Why take them east if the main hideouts are north? Maria's eyes narrowed. Could be they're trying to confuse any pursuit, or there might be another hideout we don't know about. She stared into the swirling fog. If they truly have alliances with corrupt officials and wealthy backers, they might have more safe havens than we realize. They followed the tracks deeper into the forest, the wind whistling through the pines. After another hour, a shot rang out, sharp and echoing. Maria instantly took cover behind a tree, motioning Charles to do the same. Silence followed, but it was the kind of silence that promised an unseen threat. Carefully, she inched forward, scanning the fog-shrouded slopes. Then she spotted him, a sentry perched on a rocky ledge, peering down at them with a rifle. He must have fired a warning shot or simply missed in the poor visibility. Either way, the Harrington gang knew they weren't alone in these woods. Maria signaled Charles to circle round and flank the position if possible. She moved with the quiet stealth of her Phantom Rider days, creeping up behind a cluster of boulders. Another shot cracked through the mist, splintering a tree limb near her head. She ducked, heart thudding, but forced herself to remain calm. The Harrington gang's presence meant the children and Stardust had to be nearby, but any chance of a surprise approach had been lost. They would have to rely on cunning and unrelenting pressure. Skills Maria possessed in spades. As she steadied her rifle to return fire, she felt the old thrill of the hunt surge within her, electric and alive. The Phantom Rider was very much awake, and the outlaws above were about to learn just how dangerous a cornered foe could be. Gunfire echoed across the narrow ravine for several tense minutes. Maria exchanged shots with the sentry on the ledge, each bullet zipping through the mist. It wasn't the kind of direct confrontation she preferred, but it served a purpose. It pinned down one of Harrington's men, buying Charles time to find a different angle. She caught glimpses of him darting from tree to tree. He wasn't a seasoned fighter, but desperation made him brave. At last, she heard a startled cry. Charles had managed to sneak behind the sentry and disarm him. When the gunfire ceased, Maria scrambled up the rocky incline. She found Charles panting heavily, standing over the disarmed outlaw who was clutching a grazed shoulder. The man glared up at them with a mixture of pain and fury. "Where are the children?" Charles demanded, voice shaking. "Where's Noah and Lucy?" The sentry spat on the ground. "Even if I knew, I wouldn't tell you." But the sneer in his voice faltered slightly when Maria leveled her rifle at him, eyes like flint. She spoke calmly. "Listen carefully. I'm Maria Cantrell, and I'm after my stolen horses. I also know the Harrington gang kidnapped 2 children. If you don't want this to end badly, you'll talk." Recognition flickered in the outlaw's eyes. "Cantrell, the widow from Blackstone Valley. Harrington was sure you'd come." He said. The man cut himself off, grimacing. Maria pressed. He said you'd set a trap for me? She shook her head. I've seen enough of your crew to know you're all spread thin. Collis Harrington's big plan depends on scaring people into silence. But that doesn't work on me. Charles hovered, fists clenching. He looked one push away from doing something he'd regret. Maria rested a calming hand on his shoulder and nodded for him to step back. She knelt, fixing the outlaw with a look that brokered no nonsense. Where are they taking the children? And where is Stardust, my silver dapple stallion? Swallowing hard, the outlaw finally muttered, They're holding them in the old Bighorn mine to the east. That's Harrington's secondary hideout. They needed a place no one would suspect. Maria exchanged a glance with Charles. Bighorn Mine was a maze of tunnels carved into the mountainside, abandoned after silver veins dried up years ago. And my horse? Likely with the others. Harrington knows that Stallion is valuable, so he's keeping it under heavy guard, the outlaw admitted, eyes shifting nervously. Charles's voice tightened. The children, are they alive? A nod. Far as I know, they're being used as leverage to keep certain folks in line, especially their father. Maria looked at Charles, who grimaced. Yes, me, he whispered bitterly, but no more. Gripping the sentry's shirt, Maria pinned him with a cold stare. Your best chance of walking out of this is if you disappear. I'd say get on your horse and ride west until you're out of Montana. If Harrington finds you, he'll assume you talked. And if I find you working with him again, I won't be so forgiving. The outlaw nodded, fear sliding into his eyes. Once Charles let him go, the man scrambled down the ravine, likely cursing his fate and the day he joined the Harrington gang. Maria and Charles were left alone amid the dripping pines. Above them, clouds churned ominously, threatening another downpour. The Bighorn Mine. If that was indeed the stronghold, it meant the Harrington gang was more entrenched than she'd hoped. But it also meant they had a singular point of focus, something she could exploit. Approaching the Bighorn Mine at nightfall, Maria and Charles scouted from the cover of a dense thicket. The entrance to the mine was set into a sheer rock face, partially hidden by tall pines. A scattering of lanterns glowed in the darkness, revealing armed sentries posted near the entrance. Maria counted at least 4. Farther back, she heard the restless whinny of horses, possibly a makeshift corral. Her stomach twisted at the thought of Stardust, penned up with other stolen mounts, battered and confused. Quietly, they maneuvered around the perimeter, mindful of the slope underfoot. The mine's position gave the Harrington gang a natural advantage. The area had only 2 main approaches, both narrow and easily defended. The rest was ringed by steep cliffs. Maria suspected there might be hidden trails leading to the rear of the mine, old ventilation shafts or collapsed tunnels that resourceful outlaws could reopen. That kind of subterranean labyrinth would make any rescue attempt treacherous. Huddled behind a rock outcrop, Charles was breathing hard, clearly on edge. They're in there. My kids. Lucy hates the dark, he whispered, voice quivering. Maria squeezed his shoulder gently. We'll get them out. But if we rush in, guns blazing, we might lose the only advantage we have. Surprise. He nodded, swallowing his anxiety. You're right, I can't stand thinking they're scared. Maria understood. She'd never had children of her own, but she knew the fierce, protective instinct of a parent. We'll do this smart. I've seen at least a dozen men. That might not be the entire gang, though. Harrington himself might not even be here yet. And they watched the guards rotate, a new detail arriving from inside the mine. Within that group, Maria recognized a tall, wiry figure. Lucas Dorsey, the man rumored to be the son of Deputy Marshal James Dorsey. He was said to run business deals on behalf of the Harrington gang, bridging their criminal activities with official corruption. Dorsey's presence suggested something bigger was underway than a simple ransom or horse theft. Sure enough, as Maria and Charles waited, they observed new arrivals. A wagon carrying crates, escorted by 2 men who looked more like hired guns than rustlers. The crates were marked with army insignias, which made Maria's pulse quicken. Stolen military supplies, she murmured. They're not just after horses. They're stockpiling weapons. Charles's eyes flickered. Why would they need so many guns? Could be they're planning a major heist or even a takeover of some sort. Or they might be selling them across the border, Maria speculated. Whatever it is, they've got powerful connections. No small gang can do this without someone covering their tracks in the marshal's office or the judiciary. The mention of the judiciary made her recall Sam Wyatt's warning about Judge Lockwood. If the Harrington gang had a judge in their pocket, plus a deputy marshal's son on the payroll, they could operate with near impunity. It all fit together like pieces of a puzzle that spelled out a sprawling network of corruption, one that threatened more than just her ranch. A child's cry drifted through the night air, faint but unmistakable. Charles tensed as if electrified, tears brimming. Maria placed a steadying hand on his arm. "We'll rescue them, but we need a plan." Her mind churned with possibilities. Sneaking in through an unguarded entrance might be their best shot, if they could find it. The Bighorn Mine's old blueprint might still exist, but there was no time to track it down. She'd have to rely on her memory of old territory maps, plus any markings her father might have made in that journal. "I'll circle around," she decided, quietly reloading her rifle. "If I find a back way in, I'll signal. You wait here, keep an eye on those guards. If something goes wrong, I want them looking at you first, not me." Charles nodded, though he looked terrified. They both knew the stakes. A botched rescue could mean the deaths of Noah and Lucy and the permanent loss of Stardust. But Maria Cantrell was determined. She'd once made a name for herself, outwitting outlaws far more dangerous than these. The Phantom Rider might have traded in her spurs for a wedding ring, but tonight she was back in full form. One determined woman, prepared to bring down an entire criminal network if that's what it took. Slipping away from the main entrance, Maria crept along the jagged rock face to see if there were any secondary openings to the mine. She moved with the cautious grace that had once made her notorious, scanning for tripwires. Silent on the rocky ground, every sense attuned. The deeper she went, the more she realized the terrain was honeycombed with crevices. Some natural, some likely carved by past mining efforts. Lightning flickered across the sky, illuminating a narrow fissure in the rock about 50 yards from the primary entrance. It looked too small to be a proper doorway, but large enough for a person to slip through. Maria pressed her ear to the opening, hearing the faint echo of voices and movement. This could be her chance. She edged inside, rifle held at the ready. The darkness swallowed her, only faintly broken by distant lantern light filtering through side tunnels. The air was damp, smelling of old rock dust and stagnant water. Step by cautious step, she advanced, using whichever faint glow existed to move without stumbling. In the flickers of light, she could see tool marks in the stone, indicating this passage was once part of the old silver operation. Soon, she heard raised voices from a chamber up ahead. Staying close to the wall, she edged toward the opening and peered inside. 4 men were gathered around crates stacked against the far wall. Her pulse quickened when she saw the stenciled letters, U.S. Army. These must be the stolen military supplies she and Charles had witnessed earlier. Among them, she spotted a smaller crate labeled with a name she vaguely recognized, likely contraband, perhaps gun parts. But there was something else. At the chamber's far end, 2 children were huddled together behind a makeshift wooden barrier. A guard paced back and forth, occasionally barking at them to stay quiet. Maria's heart wrenched at the sight of little Lucy's tear-streaked face, while Noah tried to comfort his sister. They were unharmed for the moment, but clearly frightened out of their wits. Scanning the rest of the chamber, she saw no sign of Stardust. Then she heard another bray echo from a side corridor. The horses were stabled somewhere deeper inside. She forced herself to focus on the immediate objective, rescuing the children without sparking a shootout that could get them killed. From her vantage, she could see the men were distracted, arguing among themselves. Words like judge, forge the documents, and governor's visit drifted to her ears. It sounded like they were talking about land grants, possibly bank records, some grand scheme that hinged on official papers. She filed it away. Right now, the kids were the priority. Just then, footsteps clattered in a corridor behind her. Maria pressed flat against the wall, holding her breath. Another outlaw strode by, muttering curses about how they had too many irons in the fire and how Collis Harrington was going to blow everything if he kept pushing. This confirmed it. Tensions were high. The larger operation was on shaky footing, too many conspirators double-crossing each other. Once the footsteps receded, Maria peered back into the chamber. If she could slip in quietly, take out the guard near the kids, and slip them out through this tunnel. But she'd need Charles's help to distract the rest of the men. She retraced her steps, careful not to dislodge any stones, determined to find him and coordinate a plan. As she moved, a renewed sense of purpose washed over her. This wasn't just about reclaiming what was hers. The Harrington gang was orchestrating something bigger, something that could corrupt and control the entire region. Saving Noah and Lucy was step one, but after that, she intended to dismantle this criminal empire piece by piece. Returning to the thicket where Charles waited, Maria quietly explained what she discovered. His face paled at the mention of the guards and crates of military supplies. Even so, a steely resolve replaced his fear when he learned where Noah and Lucy were being kept. "Tell me what to do," he said simply. "I'll do anything to get my kids back." Maria leaned in, voice low. Inside that tunnel, the children are in a side chamber. 4 men were gathered around the crates, plus 1 guard right next to Noah and Lucy. "We need to create a diversion. Something to lure those 4 men out of the chamber, or at least turn their backs." Charles nodded, gripping his rifle. "If I stage a loud distraction at the main entrance, that might pull them. I can fire a few shots, yell, pretend it's a posse come to raid them." "That could work," Maria said. "I'll use the side tunnel to slip into the chamber. I'll take out the guard by the kids quietly if I can and lead them out." Charles swallowed. "And the horses?" A flicker of determination glinted in Maria's eyes. "Once the children are safe, I'm heading deeper in to find Stardust. You can join me if you want, or get your kids out and run. Either way, I won't leave my stallion behind." He stared for a moment, then nodded. "I owe you. I'll see this through as much as I can." They hashed out the details under the light of a single lantern hidden behind rocks. The plan relied on timing. Charles would circle to the front, making sure a couple of shots echoed down into the mine. Maria, meanwhile, would sneak back through the narrow fissure. With luck, the men would race to an airsuite, leaving only the lone guard near the children. It didn't take long for the plan to unfold. Charles scrambled off into the darkness, and Maria retraced her stealthy route into the side corridor. The tension coiled tight in her chest as she approached the chamber again, listening for any sign that more guards had arrived. Instead, she heard startled shouts echoing from deeper within the mine. Charles was playing his part well. Her opportunity came swiftly. The 4 men near the crates grabbed their weapons and ran out, presumably heading toward the main entrance. That left the single guard pacing by the children. Heart pounding, Maria stepped into the chamber. The guard spotted her immediately, eyes widening, but she was faster. Her rifle butt came down in a swift arc. He crumpled to the ground, knocked cold. Noah and Lucy gasped. "We knew someone would come," Noah whispered. "Papa said we had to hold on." Maria gave them a reassuring nod, kneeling to untie their hands. "Your father is outside, creating a diversion. We're getting you out of here." She lifted Lucy gently, who clung to her with tearful relief. Noah took hold of Maria's hand, and they hurried to the side tunnel. They were nearly out when a blast of gunfire echoed from the corridor, rattling the stacked crates. Someone else was on the way back. Maria pressed the children behind a crate, taking up a defensive position. 2 outlaws charged in, confusion etched on their faces. She fired a warning shot overhead, causing them to dive for cover. "Stay down and nobody dies," she commanded. One of them, however, recognized her. "Cantrell, Harrington said you'd come." He raised his revolver, but Maria's second shot hit the gun from his hand, sending it clattering. The other man wisely froze. "Run," she ordered them, "and tell Harrington I'm taking back what's mine." They didn't wait for further encouragement, scrambling out of the chamber as if the devil were on their heels. Maria quickly shepherded the children into the fissure. She led them outside where Charles was waiting, breathless and relieved beyond measure. He gathered them into a fierce hug, tears shining in his eyes. "We have to go," Maria hissed. More men could pour out any second. Charles stared at her. "You've done enough. Come with us." She shook her head. "Not yet. Stardust is still in there." He opened his mouth to protest but saw the determination in her gaze. Taking a trembling breath, he nodded. "Then I'll help. Noah, Lucy, stay low. Follow me. We'll hide you by the pines, then I'm going back in with Maria." The children clutched his hands, terrified but hopeful. In the distance, more shouts echoed around the mine entrance, suggesting the entire camp was on high alert. The moment was fleeting, and Maria knew every second counted. Her heart hammered as they dashed for the cover of the pines. She glanced back at the mine, silhouetted against the stormy night sky. The Harrington gang's carefully guarded fortress was on the brink of collapsing into chaos, and she intended to push it over the edge. She was once the Phantom Rider, after all, and tonight she would ride the winds of justice to reclaim her stolen stallion and tear down a criminal conspiracy that dared to drag children into its depths. Looking back on Maria Cantrell's journey, we see how resilience and empathy outshine any gloom cast by greed or corruption. Despite overwhelming odds, she saved innocent lives, reclaimed her beloved stallion, and exposed the twisted network that threatened to poison the territory. Her compassion and courage remind us that even in the darkest of places, hope thrives where people stand firm for what's right. From a personal perspective, this tale highlights that justice isn't about brute force alone. It's about unity, perseverance, and using our gifts. Be they tracking skills, a strong community bond, or a willingness to help those in need. Maria's victory proves that no criminal enterprise can endure when honorable folks work together. What did you think of this story? Did any moment stand out or inspire you? Please comment below to share your thoughts and join the discussion. We'd love to hear your perspective and to welcome you back for our next adventure.